Assemble! Stay dandy, baby. Get ready for a jumbo-sized episode of Tower of God, my friends, because this episode was jam-friggin' packed with material. Not only did we get a major funeral for one of the big characters of the series, but we got a big reunion between the two main characters of the show, not to mention a character has been revealed as a brand new villain for the series. But even with all of that, I still think my favorite part about this episode is the formal introduction of mini Rak Wraithraiser. Before I begin the review, I just want to thank you guys for continuing to tune into these reviews. They're still doing very good. I love all of the comments. I appreciate all of the likes that these videos are getting. And I really love talking with you guys about this show because this is a new experience for me. I've never really been introduced to the world of webtoons until Tower of God. I've been aware of them in some senses, but now I'm really taking a deep dive in, and I think that Tower of God is sort of opening up the floodgates for the future of webtoon adaptations in anime form. We already have a couple more that are going to be coming this year, so let's see. Maybe they're going to change the entire anime landscape. That being said, so far, Tower of God continues to be a very strong experience, and this is just another episode filled with a lot of really great layers, really great characters, story development, and like I said, some really surprising twists and turns. So let's go ahead and dive right into this episode, which is immediately dealing with the death of Ho from the last episode, a character who was driven to the point of desperation, to the point where he had to actually kill himself. It was a really disturbing moment for the series and shows that it's not afraid to go into very dark and heavy territory, and everybody is sort of like dealing with his death in a very interesting way. We also get to see that Rachel did survive her encounter with Ho. Of course, we all probably knew this was going to happen. She's a main character who's probably not going to be killed off so unceremoniously, so quickly in the series, not to mention before she gets her real reunion with Bam, which truly does happen in this episode. But all the characters are holding a funeral for Ho, which is a really nice moment, and it also shows that a lot of people have died during these competitions. There's this really good wide shot of like this massive field which is floating in the sky, which is filled with all of these like burials of people who've like died in this competition. So this is nothing new here. This happens all the time, but we're just experiencing it with this brand new group here, and they celebrate by not only honoring Ho, but by getting blackout drunk, which is hilarious because I don't know the age of these characters. Maybe they're underage drinking, but it's mostly played for laughs, especially getting to see all of them get a little shit-faced and, of course, pass out. Juxtaposed to this, of course, is the reunion between Bam and Rachel, which is official here. Like, there's no more hiding the fact that she's another person. She admits that what she did was wrong. She abandoned Bam in order to actually climb the tower, and it's a really heartbreaking moment. You can truly see, too, how incredibly devoted Bam actually is to Rachel and trying to make her happy. She's now wheelchair ridden, and he's taken it upon himself to actually help her get to the top of the tower. It's no longer simply about finding her and making his way to the top. He simply wants to help her get to the top and fulfill her dreams. Again, Bam continues to be a pretty interesting character. He's a stand-up guy. He's selfless, and he's a little naive in what he's actually doing, as I'm still not quite completely trustworthy of what Rachel is trying to do here, and I have a feeling she is going to eventually fully recover. I just don't see them doing that to this character this early on in the series, and there's a lot more that we don't know, especially about her relationship with that one big guy who is pretty much mysteriously just sort of disappeared out of nowhere. There's a lot more about Rachel and Bam that we don't know about, and it's pretty clear that the creators of the series don't want us to actually know about that. But let's get to the star of this episode, Rak Wraithraiser. He goes through a pretty big transformation in this episode when he runs into Hong Song-yu in this hallway, and for some odd reason, he pisses him off enough to the point where Hong Song-yu uses his crazy powers to shrink him down into this cute little alligator boy. It is weird, to say the least, and I don't know if Rak is going to stay like this for the rest of the series. If he does, he might have just become an even better character, because his personality completely clashes with the fact that he looks like a freaking alligator child, and he still has the same old voice and everything, and he has his giant spear, so it's just really funny and, of course, played for laughs. This big tough guy has now been reduced to what is effectively a freaking stuffed animal. What I especially loved about this scene is that both Kun and Rak actually have a conversation with Bam, where they're actually going to be joining him and helping out and getting Rachel to the top of the tower. And Bam takes a while to even realize that Rak is small, or maybe he's just sort of indifferent to it the entire time. The point is, get prepared for a lot of jokes on Rak Wraithraiser's part, because everybody's going to be pushing him around because he's just a little guy. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the scene where Serena apparently is officially dropping out of this competition. She realizes that shit is just getting real, this is a life and death situation, and she's a character who knows when to run away. What I especially love about this scene is the interaction that she has with Shibisu. Shibisu comes across as kind of just a dumb, goofy kind of joke character, but he has a surprising amount of heart to him. He might not have a lot of muscles, and he might not be able to have He might not have a lot of muscles, he might not have any crazy powers, at least that we know of quite yet, but he's one of the most sincere characters from the entire show, and that always makes him incredibly entertaining. But now let's get to some shit that's just insane when you explain it out loud. Let's talk about that character of Yuga, who is the instructor who is teaching Bam and Ho and Lauro all about how to control the power of Shinsu to be a wave controller. Now, he was already a weird-looking character before, but now we get the implication that he's actually some sort of secret mole, a villain, if you will, which has actually infiltrated this entire test scene, and he's actually confronted by Han Song-yu in this episode. They're in this, like, weird underground cavern, and we get to see that Yuga is not actually the nicest guy. In fact, Yuga has a completely different title, a title that's so ridiculous, I actually had to write it down, and I'm almost certainly going to mispronounce this name, so let's go ahead and jump in. Yuga is actually the Royal Enforcement Division Unit number 67, and his true name, get ready for this, is Lo Po Bia Ren. Personally, I was fine with Yuga. Personally, I was fine with Sheep Man. The big reveal here is that Yuga is actually secretly infiltrated this place, and he's actually going after the 13-month weapons, the Green April and the Black March. I'm not sure what his ultimate motive is aside from gaining these weapons back and returning them to his master, but we also get to see that he's actually not exactly who he appears to be. Even though he looks like this big woolly sheep type of character, there's some sort of other being which is actually inside of him. And I was really excited for this scene because it looked like shit was just about to explode. Han Song-yu and him were going to have this big epic battle which somehow involved summoning massive eels out of the ground and fighting each other, but it doesn't really happen. But it does come with a nice twist. Han Song-yu apparently is going to help this dude out. I have a feeling, though, Han Song-yu is not exactly a bad guy. I think he's actually just goading him on, and maybe he's going to sort of, like, play him in a sense. Also, Han Song-yu is not to be fucked with. He actually ended up taking out this eel in, like, one slash, cutting off its head, which, yes, my friends, was metal. And speaking of bullshit, let's go ahead and move into the end of the episode where we get to see that a lot of the characters have passed their test, and they're getting ready to move on to the big final part of this competition so that they can make their way to climbing the tower. Everybody is given their designated positions and everybody's passed, including Rachel. Or actually, she hasn't. And I thought that this was kind of a dick move on Han Song-yu's part, where they're basically talking about the fact that she passed, but since she has such severe injuries and has to be in a wheelchair, she technically fails all at the same time, so she doesn't actually have an opportunity to move forward. Of course, this ends up pissing off Bam to the point where Kun decides that he's actually going to speak for him. There's this really cool scene where there's one of those guys who decides to confront Han Song-yu about the fact that he didn't actually get to pass the test, and he proves this because Han Song-yu ends up torturing this guy with the power of Shinsu, which basically makes him look like a complete and total fool. However, when Kun goes down there, he of course uses a little bit of his intellect to try and get past all of this crazy shit, and of course to probably avoid being tortured by Shinsu as well. He says that he wants to go up into an administrator test personally. The problem is he's a regular, and only irregulars can do that. And of course, Bam opens his mouth really wide, saying that he's going to go through with this in an effort to hopefully allow Rachel to continue to participate. And I'm not sure what this test is going to involve, but it's going to involve that weird administrator thing that we saw earlier a couple of episodes ago that he made a contract with, that weird giant freaky creature thing. I don't know what the deal is with that, but what's really cool about this scene too is that we also get to see that Kun is sort of like manipulated everyone into actually helping him out. So I think that this is going to be really exciting going forward. Again, the drama and the intensity just continues to unfold in Tower of God, and I have no idea of knowing where it's actually going to go. And again, that's what makes this show just so engrossing. Not knowing. I cannot predict anything, and that's another reason why I do not read the webtoon, the manga version, whatever you want to call it. I'm just steering clear of it. I just want to see how this season is going to unfold, and maybe if I end up really enjoying it, I might take a look at the actual webtoon version. With that in mind, what's the rundown on this episode of Tower of God? Man, this was just another episode that was filled with just so much material. I didn't even talk about the small scene between Kun and Han Sung-yu, or I believe it was Lara Ro. They were sort of discussing what was up with that weird note which actually went to Ho. They're definitely investigating what caused him to go so damned insane, and that's when we have that red-haired character who gets introduced. We've seen her a couple times before. She was the one with the mask, and I think her name is, and boy am I gonna butcher this one, it's like Hwa Ryun? I don't know. I'm really bad at pronouncing names, so this one's going to be really tough for me. But I have a feeling that she was probably involved in this in some sort of senses, the way that they've shown her and portrayed her in this episode. The fact that she knew so much about Ho, and that she talked to Kun about it. Everything here is just a little strange, and it's all sort of adding up to something interesting. Although I still have a feeling that Kun was somehow involved in all of this, being that he's just, you know, an A-class manipulator. It just seems like something that he would actually cook up, and he's probably hiding it really well. At least that's my ultimate theory. I'm still standing clear that Kun is probably the one who is responsible for goading on Ho. There's a darker element to his character they don't want to quite reveal because they hide it behind, you know, his overall facade, but still, it's something that's pretty interesting. But overall, this episode, again, was kind of like a nice breather before we move on to the next stuff. After the big tag game, we needed an episode where we needed to stop and relax for a little bit. And there were a lot of moments and levity that made this episode work. I mean, Rak Wraithraiser being turned into a tiny version of himself. The fact that all the characters got completely drunk was really funny. We got to see more human sides of these characters, which I thought was really great. But there was also room for, like, intrigue with the introduction of Yuga being some sort of weird, creepy villain, going after the weapons, and then of course, there's the Bam and Rachel thing. Like, you know, I didn't see it even happening this early on in the series. This type of story element is something that a lot of other shows would hold off for a long time, but they're getting right into it into the very first season here, and that's why I still have a feeling that something's not quite right here. There's something that Rachel is not explaining as to why she abandoned Bam. I have a feeling there's a lot more to that, not to mention there's a lot of characters who are taking notice of Rachel. I mean, even in Dorsey notices there's something not quite right about this girl, and there's, you know, more than meets the eye with her character, to say the least. I don't know if this is all some sort of weird, crazy setup, but I hope it does have some sort of good payoff. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, what makes this episode of Tower of God is its characters, which are definitely one of its strongest elements. One of the best, most diverse casts of characters that I have ever seen, which all have distinctive designs and personalities, and they all get to shine in this episode. And it also really helps that the production value of the show continues to look really good. Not just in the character design, but in the overall look of the worlds itself. While the scene with Ho and the big funeral scene was, like, honestly kind of sad, the overall look of this world was great. This pristine field on this floating island, which has all of these graves all over it. There's something about it which was really serene. And again, it's little moments like that that I always manage to appreciate from the show. Juxtaposed to that is a very dark and disturbing scene with the introduction of Yuga, a crazy goat dude who has some sort of weird goblin coming out of his mouth as he summons a massive eel to attack a dude named Han Sung-yu. Again, saying this shit out loud makes me realize how strange it really is, but visually speaking, thematically speaking, it just freaking works. It continues to pop and explode off the screen in every single episode. So I can't wait to see how all of this is going to wrap up, how all of the other people are going to get involved in helping out Bam in this final part of the competition, because we're getting really close to the end of the season here. I mean, I believe there's only like 2 more episodes, so I'm really interested to see what sort of stopping point they're actually going to find here. It's very obvious that we've only scratched the surface of Tower of God, and there's a lot more to come, and I can't wait to see it go down. So I loved this episode a lot. Again, kind of a slower one, but one that I really appreciated, again, for its characters and its smaller moments, and of course planting the seeds for a lot of future storylines later on. And Rak Wraithraiser. Little Rak Wraithraiser. That's what made this episode for me. 5 out of 5. So thank you guys so much for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel for more reviews just like this one, as well as our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. And make sure to hit that like button. If you like this video, hit that button. It's easy to do and it helps out these videos a lot. If you are subscribed, make sure you hit that bell notification icon. It's going to let you know when all of our videos are released. And of course, if you really want to help out this channel aside from watching the videos, please, I implore you to check out my Patreon account in the description box below. If you become a patron and make a small donation, I will review an anime series of your choice. And there's a lot of Patreon reviews which are getting ready to come out over the course of the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for all of that. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time, guys. And as always, stay dandy, baby.